Ladies and gentlemen, you welcome to this edition of the 6 p.m. prime time newscast on Equinoxe television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Babla Jonathan. A police inspector is gunned down in the crisis-hit northwest regional chief town, Bamenda. Bullets have been crisscrossing the town since the early hours of today. And the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa documents a series of atrocities committed by elements of the National Armed Forces, Security and Defense Forces in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Stay with us. The atmosphere has been tense in the town of Bamenda, headquarters of the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, one of the two English-speaking regions of the country hit by socio-political and security crisis for close to 4 years today. A police inspector was gunned down earlier today as guns have been talking in the town of Bamenda, so to speak, since the early hours of the morning. And on the line to Bamenda, correspondent Frederick Takang, who says the day has been a tense one.
Yes, effectively, shooting started at about 15 minutes to 2 p.m. around City Kamer's roundabout, popularly known as Liberty Square. Immediately, businesses around that area started closing their doors. People were rushing to take either a bike or a taxi to their various homes. It's later on that we learned from security sources that a police inspector known as Leng Bikwe was shot by gunmen around City Kemes. According to other sources, the suspected killers were on a bike and opened fire on the police inspector, who was with another colleague, with other colleagues doing control at that area. So after that incident, more policemen and also military men were deployed around town. Shooting was everywhere, and places like Commercial Avenue and other areas that were functioning started closing. Some inhabitants had to seek refuge in some offices. As for now, the central town is deserted, but areas like Nkwen are still functioning. This incident is happening just some few days after the killing of a soldier working with the army rescue here in Bamenda. And for the past day, the northwest region has witnessed an increase in violence, with most often local made bombs that are placed in various areas, creating panic amongst the population.
And we now take you to some streets of the northwest regional capital, Bamenda, where our correspondent Stella says that some city dwellers are stranded after today's commotion provoked by the killing of a police officer in the town. Stella.
Panic gripped the population of Bamenda as from the Commercial Avenue, City Chemist roundabout and Small Mancon, gunshots are fired. The commotion is as a result of the gunning down of a police inspector on duty by gunmen. As early as 3 p.m., the town of Bamenda was deserted. Market women ran away, abandoning food and other goods in the drizzling rain. Shops and offices were being locked up rapidly by their owners.
The whole market, people that live shed and away they know that. People that live shed inside that whole section away they know locker. You the lock shed.
On the streets of Bamenda, one could hardly make a difference between a person with disability, a pregnant woman, the young, and the old. Everyone ran as fast as their legs could carry them. At the time of this report, many are stranded in town. Taxis and bikes cannot be spotted easily. An unusual calm has engulfed Abakwa town.
And the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa has documented a series of atrocities committed by government forces in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. Greater details in this report by Equinoxe.
In its August 31, 2020 report, the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, CHADA, exposes human rights violations committed by the military between May and August 2020 in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon, despite its press release of August 13, 2020 for armed groups to stop committing rights abuses against civilians like killing, kidnapping and ransom demands, recruitment of child soldiers, intimidation and harassment of civilians, as well as the use of lethal weapons in communities. Between May and August 2020, the military, according to CHADA, has masterminded extrajudicial executions, arbitrary arrest, unlawful detention, looting and extortion, poor prison conditions, and inhumane and degrading treatment of detainees. Inhabitants have also seen their houses burnt down, including their villages, forcing them to flee and seeking refuge in bushes and other towns. The Barrister Agbabalas Rights Organization reports that the military on Thursday, 28th of May 2020, conducted an offensive raid in the Upper Bonduma neighborhood situated in Boya, southwest region, which led to the killing of 4 unarmed young men in an uncompleted building where they were smoking cannabis. Still in the report, a native of Bangen, southwest region, Ebangi Breeze, was shot dead on Saturday, July 4, 2020 by the military for alerting separatist fighters and the population to escape when they entered the village for an operation. Breeze was killed and several others were arrested. Some were tortured and inflicted injuries. A private house was also looted and later burnt down. CHADA also reports military invasion of Modele village in Menchum Valley subdivision of the Northwest region on July 20. This day, they attacked the civilian population in reprisal for the death of 3 soldiers killed by separatist fighters. Houses were burnt down and 3 persons shot. Meantime, on August 13, 2020, the Defense and Security Forces opened fire on 3 children in Tiko, Fako Division of the Southwest region and killed a 17-year-old girl called Besem Blandine, who went hunting snails alongside 2 other boys. The military took them for separatist fighters. A boy escaped with bullet wounds in the hand. A lawyer who went following the case was arrested by gendarmes and kept in custody for 1 night at the Limbe Gendarmerie Command Post. Elsewhere in Mauto, southwest region, the military shot dead 7 unarmed civilians in response to the gruesome killing of a woman in Moyoka, allegedly by separatist fighters. Before the killing, the military had raided a local church in the outskirts of Mauto and shot the pastor and 3 other boys. They invaded the church because worshippers shared a separatist ideology. CHADA also holds the military responsible for the death of Welcome Mohamadu, a cannabis seller in Takija village in Kumbu, Bui division of the Northwest region on June 27th. Killing of 2 unarmed civilians in Ikiliwinzi in the Meme Division Southwest region, causing many to flee when they arrived in search of separatist fighters. Regarding the arbitrary arrest and detention of civilians in precarious prison conditions, CHADA regrets the sad death of Reverend Tangem Thomas in chains on his hospital bed in Yaoundé. With these atrocities and more, the Agbabalas organization calls on the government to investigate all atrocities documented in this report and bring perpetrators to justice and put an end to human rights violations and disrespect for the rule of law.
Atrocities which the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa says were committed by elements of the National Armed Forces. The government of the Republic of Cameroon is yet to react to that report. In the similar reports published by other organizations and civil society leaders, the Ministry of Defense rejected the allegations, and so far the Ministry of Defense has acknowledged the involvement of security and defense forces only in the Ngarbu massacre and of course in the nation's political capital Yaoundé. Today women came out in their numbers to denounce violence and atrocities in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. And they are saying that the killings and destruction of properties must come to an end. Cameroon's Minister of Women's Empowerment and Family and a member of parliament and other personalities, a member of parliament, Honorable Monjowa Lifaka, and other personalities who took part in that gathering today in Yaoundé, urging for the respect of the dignity of the woman and human life in general. Meantime, members of the Indomitable Patriot civil society organization are urging the United States of America and other countries to arrest and send back home all the secessionist leaders for them to face the law. Coming up, we take you to Nguti in the Kupe-Maninguba division, southwest region of the country, where some inhabitants recently affected by mud flow and landslide are still struggling to recover from that incident. The government has sent aid channeled to them by the senior divisional officer of the Kupe-Maninguba division, Jean-Marie Chakwi. Smanjikan Gabriel has more.
Now, we are presently at the situation where
several zones affected by the mud flow that surprised Mbo hinterland villages in Nguti subdivision till date having been touched.
We are presently at the situation where the landslide claimed to rise occurred. The structure was standing just behind this tree and the whole area is deserted. Right down there, you can see the roofs, the zinc that came up from the structure where the three persons were being killed by this massive landslide.
Instead, the inhabitants whose main road collapsed as a result of the heavy downpour are now out struggling to see how movement can be effective from one village to another as they construct a makeshift bridge. The flood took away the lives of 4 persons and destroyed several properties. Due to the devastating effects of the mud flow, the government, through the senior divisional officer of Kupe-Maninguba division, paid a visit to some of the flood victims. Jean-Marie Chakwi, apart from sympathizing with the population, gave out some materials to help them, and some say the gesture was timely, though small.
I want to thank the committee made by the head of state. These are things they gave me. I lost a daughter in my village. The president of the STO, the president of the mayor of Nguti, I want to relax. I want to feel that if you have a problem, they know you in this Cameroon. This is my sister that lost a son, lost a daughter. We receive money. Matras, burger, very soon have gano oil, fish, bunga, janga.
The materials handed to the population were in different forms.
The assistance was both financial and material. So there was some financial assistance we give to the bereaved family and to those who lost their houses, and items as well had been handed to the population.
Notwithstanding the support from the state, the affected population are calling on the government to urgently rehabilitate the roads that have been destroyed to enable movement into the 10 villages that make up Upper Nkongo and Nkongo Mbeng.
He is struggling to get his way up to the compound.
Still in the southwest region of Cameroon, the divisional officer of Boya, the regional headquarters, has urged the population of his area of command to join public authorities in the anti-COVID-19 fight. He was in some parts of the town today taking note as far as the effectiveness of the outdoor COVID-19 screening campaign is concerned. Derek Jato reports.
The test campaign for coronavirus is now moving into the quarters in Boya subdivision.
Testing is free of charge.
That is to say, the districts have taken the cue and they will come in the nooks and crannies, all the quarters. From here they will move to.
And Dr. Ibongo Zacchaeus Nanje, Southwest Regional Delegate of Public Health, said the Tireti approach is effective on the ground in his region.
Now we are reaching out to the population to intensify testing, which is also part of the treaties, that is track, test and treat.
At the level of Boya, Abba Abdurrahman, the divisional officer for Boya subdivision, is also on the field.
Well, what we need to know is that there is a massive campaign going on at the level of the Boya Health District, and it is free.
The boss of this subdivision has equally been briefed on the specifics of the campaign.
It is not only here, you will go down to our various quarters, right to my 17th, have yourself screened out, and you will know your status to protect your family, to protect the community, and also contribute in our collective effort to send the COVID out of our country.
And Dr. Ngom Matthias, the district medical officer for Boya subdivision supervising the operation, equally called on the population to show up for the test, for all the necessary logistics have been put in place.
The test, everything is in place so that the campaign is successful. And we want to thank the support of the delegation of Public and the minister, who gave us all the logistic financial material to be able to carry out this successful campaign.
And everywhere they go, this medical team is announced by a forerunner with the use of megaphones, inviting and educating the population on the need to do the coronavirus test.
A significant section of Marwa remains disconnected from the rest of the far north region and the nation at large following the collapse of a bridge, and that incident has adversely affected business between Cameroon and neighboring Chad. The governor of the far north region, Mijiawa Bakari, was on the scene to take stock of the situation, and he urged the population to remain calm, that the government is working out solutions to the problem. Immaculate Foge reports.
The heavy downpour that triggered the collapse of the Pala Bridge on the 31st of August 2020 has halted circulation along the National Road Number 1. The bridge that links Marwa, Kuseri and Jamina has been cut off from the rest of the city. Inhabitants blame the government for being negligent to the plight of the people.
Marwa, la fille aînée du renouveau, Marwa, la fille détestée du renouveau.
The far north region of Kamer has been abandoned by the government. Last year, we pleaded that the collapsed Bailio Bridge be fixed, but nothing has been done. Those leading this country are not serious. This bridge is on the National Road Number 1. How can such a road be abandoned? The government should be responsible. They need our services during elections, but when it comes to developing our area, they are absent. The incident provoked the discern of the governor of the region, Mijiawa Bakari. He came to the site to evaluate the damages. After his visit, he immediately organized a crisis meeting where they deliberated on what could be done to remedy the situation. The city mayor of Marwa, Sani Babani, assured the population that measures have been put in place to ensure that circulation is re-established.
Juste après l'incident de Palar, comme nous pouvons l'appeler.
Immediately after the incident occurred, measures were taken in order to enable circulation. We created a deviation that can enable road users circulate freely. The problem we are working on now is setting up a timetable for heavy-duty trucks, applying the stretch of road.
Quels sont les horaires que nous allons appliquer pour que ces camions chargés
The population of Marwa are now counting on the efforts of the government so the bridge can be fixed.
Talking Point is up next. Thanks for joining us in Talking Points. We are receiving the Human Rights Officer of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, Kelvin. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
You must have seen some pictures and you must have received some information on what's been happening in the town of Bamenda since about 2 a.m. Today. What's your take as a human rights officer on such happenings at a time when government authorities are indicating that we are gradually moving to peace, a return to peace and normalcy in the two Anglophone regions?
What is happening in Bamenda this afternoon is not strange because we are in a crisis situation and we have incidents of violence occurring almost on a daily basis. So this afternoon we have seen images coming from Bamenda showing that the security situation is not actually the best, and at the moment we are still to actually know what is happening because we have seen civilians lying on the ground to protect themselves against stray bullets, and we also heard gun firing. But at the moment we cannot really make any statement because we need to know what is happening. We need to know what is causing the situation in Bamenda today, and we need to know if there are any casualties or if there are any human rights abuses, because the government can still be doing something lawful, but if they go and do something arbitrary, it is now that the human rights will come in now and say you have abused this person's right, you have done this. But what is happening now, we can just say it's harassment. We are still to investigate and know what is actually going on in Bamenda this afternoon.
All right, before your last report, the organization published a report on atrocities committed by armed civilians. And today there is a police officer, a police inspector who was gunned down in the town of Bamenda. What does that speak to you concerning or with regards to the situation on the ground and the evolution of the crisis? Police officer, police inspector guns down.
Yes, this is not a strange issue because it has been happening repeatedly. Last week, a soldier was killed and the military in reprisal went and burned down homes and business premises of unarmed civilians. It is the separatist fighters who are fighting against the military, and their target is the military. Any uniform officer can be attacked. So when we see this type of things, it only tells you that the situation is deteriorating almost every day. And we have the military who go in reprisal of the killing of one of their colleagues, and they instead violate but human rights. They go and harass, intimidate, and cause the population to flee, which is wrong. Their target is supposed to be the armed separatist fighters who are also targeting the military. And a soldier attack in this situation, we understand that it is the war that is going on, and it is only the military that can be attacked by separatist fighters, and it is only the separatist fighters that are supposed to be targeted by the military.
And when we look at what is happening today in the two Anglophone regions of the country, there's a question about the coming days, the coming months, the coming weeks, the coming years of those two regions.
Every day we see these things happening. It's not something that has started just today. It has been going on for 4 years, and we have been documenting atrocities committed by both parties, and we have been trying to get the stakeholders involved to sit down and talk and find a solution to the crisis. We keep seeing things happening on a daily basis, and we keep hearing that there is some talks with these people. We heard of the Swiss process, and for a while it disappeared. We also recently heard of talks between government authorities and members of a separatist group jailed in Kondengi, and today we don't even know if the talks are continuing or everything has come to a standstill, and yet we have fighting on the ground and civilians are paying the supreme price. Civilians are being killed on a daily basis. We have homes being burnt, and this is causing a new wave of displacement. If you look at what happened in Santa few months ago, just in July, homes of civilians were burnt, and most of them ran to the bush, and that keeps happening every day. Just last week we heard of an invasion in Boyo division, and the military did not just target the armed separatist fighters, they also focused on civilian property, and homes were burnt which belong to civilians.
All right. Before we get into the details of the last report which the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa published, there was another report highlighting atrocities committed by armed civilians, and the organization was seriously criticized. Criticisms were just coming from everywhere. I read in some WhatsApp forums, on social media, people criticizing the organization, criticizing the leader of the organization, the founder and president, Barrister Agobala, and so on.
First of all, we do not work on people's timeline. We are a neutral organization, and we do our work as neutral as possible. We do not follow. We are not a machine, a propaganda machine. We do not work according to people's timeline. We monitor, we document, and we report atrocities committed by both parties. On the 13th of August, we published a report outlining atrocities committed by armed separatist fighters, which range between murder, kidnapping for ransom, forceful recruitment of child soldiers, as well as theft and looting. And because we do not work on people's timeline, we waited for a while, and yesterday we also came out with a report outlining atrocities committed by the defense and security forces. And this report outlines atrocities ranging between extrajudicial executions, arson of homes and villages, arbitrary arrests and illegal detentions, as well as deteriorating prison conditions and torture. And these things are happening on the ground. We have victims who are suffering, we have eyewitnesses. And to come up with this report, we always talk to the primary victims. We monitor, we document, and we report. We do not fabricate, we do not invent. These are things happening on the ground. And when we document, we publish and call on the parties involved, the stakeholders to, and in this case, concerning the atrocities by government troops, we recommended to the government to go to the ground and investigate these atrocities thoroughly and bring the perpetrators to justice. If we don't document and report these things, impunity will take over and there will be no chance for the rule of law. So we always recommend to the government that they should investigate these atrocities and bring the perpetrators to account for their crimes.
Can we know a little more about how you gather the information that you publish in the different reports? Because there are some government authorities who often say civil society organizations, they don't go to the field, they sit in the offices and they receive information from here and there, and they put together without proper investigation, without going to the field to actually get the information from the right sources. And so they think that sometimes you're inflating figures and information and so on for some personal gains.
We have offices in the northwest and southwest regions, and we have well-trained human rights defenders who go to the field, monitor and document these atrocities. They talk to victims, primary victims, talk to eyewitnesses, and we also receive complaints, written complaints to our organization from concerned individuals and the victims themselves. We have these testimonies, we have evidence, we have everything which we can prove that our reports are coming from the victims and from eyewitnesses. We don't just sit and fabricate stories and tell. We are not a news-breaking organization, or we monitor, document and report. We talk to victims, we talk to eyewitnesses, and we also receive complaints from concerned persons before we come up with these reports.
Right, even news-breaking organizations go to the field, they investigate, and they report facts. And now, talking about the atrocities committed by elements of the National Armed Forces, what's the frequency of the atrocities?
it happens on daily basis, and most of the times it happens in reprisal of an attack on the military. For instance, we had in Bamenda last week where a soldier was killed, and in reaction to that, the military went and destroyed business premises, burned down structures of civilians. And this also happened last year where the village of Mankon was burned down, and when the government was accused of arson, they said the military acted out of confusion. And these things happen almost every day. When we report, they say the military is acting professionally, and yet we have people on the ground who are suffering the effects of military excesses. So we always try to monitor
those atrocities which you mentioned in the different reports are referred to as collateral damage by the military. The military calls those atrocities collateral damage.
No, we cannot say it should be collateral damage, because even if you look at the Geneva Conventions, they talk of targets. You cannot target a place where you know there are civilians and you want to start firing at separatist fighters because you think that you can maybe kill one of them. There are places where combatants are not supposed to fight in. We have seen situations where military shoot even at hospital premises. They walk into hospitals, remove patients on the bed and shoot them. And these things are clearly crimes against humanity, and we condemn these atrocities because they do not reflect what the government owes a duty to protect and promote human rights, yet they are also a party to the violations.
What are some of the areas of the two regions recording the highest number of atrocities being committed by elements of the National Armed Forces and the separatist fighters as well?
We wouldn't say there are any particular places, because almost everywhere there is military presence, almost in all divisions, in all towns and villages, as well as the separatist fighters. These people conduct hostilities on almost daily basis. So and sometimes it happens where an incident like what happened in Moyuka, where Comfort Tumasan was beheaded by armed separatist fighters. We saw the reaction of the military. They went there in search of separatist fighters, and we saw gross human rights violations committed by the separatists, the military. Sorry, they brought out civilians and arrested some, and brought to Boya, and it is the courts in Moyuka which have jurisdiction to hear matters of persons arrested in Moyuka. Unfortunately, the court was burned down sometime last 2 years ago by armed separatist fighters, and so those who were arrested in Moyuka were brought to Boya, and we have testimonies that some paid to be released.
Some paid to be released, and some of the people who are equally arrested in the two Anglophone regions are rather transferred to Yaoundé, where they are in detention, and so on. But is it right for people to be arrested in the northwest or southwest regions, and they are carried to Yaoundé for trial, whereas there are courts competent in those areas to try?
If you look at the judicial organization of Cameroon, you will see that in every subdivision of the country there is supposed to be a court. We have courts of first instance in subdivisions and high courts in divisions, and we also have the appeal court at the level of the region. So when people are arrested from a subdivision, let's say somebody is arrested in Moyuka, which Moyuka has a court, and transferred to Yaoundé, it is now a breach of jurisdiction, because these people are supposed to be heard in the place of commission of the offense, or in the place of arrest of the individual, yet they are being transferred to Yaoundé. And not just transferred to Yaoundé, civilians are also transferred and tried in military courts, which do not have jurisdiction to hear matters concerning civilians.
And some of them are detained for a long period of time without trial and so on.
Yes, we have people who have been in jail for more than 2 years, and for as long, I mean, people who have been in jail from the beginning of the crisis, and they have never been heard in court. They have never had access to a lawyer. They don't ever have family. visit, and those are some of the things we say the rights of detainees are being violated. We have somebody, even in the report we published, we mentioned a particular individual in the New Bell prison who was arrested in Penja last year when there was a crisis between the people of Bafang and the Anglophones living in Bubatiri in Tombea subdivision, and some of the Anglophones were arrested and sent to New Bell here in Douala, and some of them were released during the presidential pardon, and there are some who are still detained there, and they have not appeared in court. Their cases have never been heard, and even access to the family is restricted. And those are things that happen almost in all the detention centers around the country. There are some people who have been in jail just by a remand from maybe the state council or an official in power, and they have not been presented in court for the period they have spent in jail.
All right. What is the impact, the immediate impact of some of the atrocities you've highlighted in the last report and in the other reports on the situation in the two Anglophone regions of the country? The immediate impact.
The immediate impact is that civilians are the ones paying the supreme price, and the importance of the report is that the authorities are aware that this is happening on the ground. Soldiers are committing human rights atrocities, and we have recommended for them to investigate and bring perpetrators to justice. And we are also looking for
the evolution of the situation.
Yes,
contributing to kind of mitigate the separatist activities, or it's kind of pouring oil in the fire.
The report tells you that crimes are being committed on the ground by both sides. We don't just document and report. We do this because we want to do advocacy for a solution for the parties involved to find a solution to the crisis. So when we document and report, it means we are telling them that these things are happening on the ground and you need to find a solution to this crisis. We have recommended to the parties to have a dialogue by the stakeholders so that they can find a solution to the crisis and everyone will live at peace.
That seems not to be happening.
Unfortunately, we have heard of previous talks by government and separatist fighters in Konengi, and we also heard of one that was happening in Switzerland, and yet nothing came out of it. And on the ground we still have the same situation. Even the major national dialogue came and passed, and yet the situation on the ground is still deteriorating. We still have gross human rights violations committed by both sides, and we still have civilians fleeing homes and villages and moving to other towns as IDPs.
Some human rights defenders like you are threatened, some attacked by unknown persons. What about you? Have you?
Yes, when you are doing the right thing, people will always criticize you for what you are doing. When you report that armed separatist fighters have committed atrocities, they will say you are seeing what the government is doing and you are not talking about it. And when you say the government has done this, they will say, oh yes, it is the government that is doing this. And it happens almost every day. We receive threats, we receive all these things, but because we are out for the interests of the civilians, we are out to promote and protect human rights, we are just doing our job as neutral as possible. We are not a propaganda tool. We are a neutral human rights organization, and we are just working for the interests of the society.
You're a young person doing a very delicate job that to an extent puts your life on the line. What is your driving force?
I have been doing human rights for quite a while, and I have a passion to protect and promote human rights. That is just what keeps me going.
All right, you're braving the odds.
Thank you.
All right, Akem Coin Kelvin, Human Rights Officer for the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me on the program.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today.